You can reach and bring up from memory into your conscious mind. Like right now, you aren't thinking about something, namely your homework. Maybe you are. Your phone number. You weren't thinking of your phone number, but you can think of your phone number. So that's in the preconscious, but then there's the subconscious mind. And what's in the subconscious mind you don't have any access to. So the subconscious is that part of the mind that is not available to the conscious mind. Now Freud said what develops with a person, he also said the child is the father of the man. And by that he meant that what happens to you or what becomes of you depends on what happened to you in childhood. And so here's his stages of psychosexual development. So the first stage is the oral stage of development. And what's the source of libido? By libido, Freud meant the source of energy. The word libido oftentimes gets referred to as sexual energy, but Freud thought of it as more of just biological urgency. Biological energy. The source of libido is the pleasures of the breast, so nursing or sucking on the breast. And what's the source of trauma to the child? Well, what happens to a child as they get older? Little baby is getting its source of pleasure from nursing, right? From breastfeeding. At some point, by the time they're, say, 18, 20, 24, little boy is no longer allowed to suck on his mother's breast. 24 months. What are you people thinking? What happens in between? That's called weaning, right? So that's a traumatic event in which the child is no longer allowed to suck. And the child can become fixated. And what's the oral fixation like? Well, the child fixated at the oral stage might become anorexic or bulimic, bulimia, or might be overweight, become a big eater, might become a gum chewer, or a smoker, might become a stutterer, or a big speaker, a big talker, a big liar. Might become a politician. Well, let's talk a little bit more about libido and the biological energy. There's three systems in the mind. There's the ego, there's the superego, and there's the id. The id represents, it works on the pleasure principle. It's where it's biological and it's biological urges. The superego, that reflects society and morality. And the ego, that's the self, it has to work on the reality principle. About this time in class, the id says, you have to urinate. Just go ahead and do it. It would be a relief. It would release pressure. It's a biological urge. Go ahead, do it. Superego says, oh, that would be shameful, that would be embarrassing. You can't do that, that's not allowed. We don't accept that. Ego says, when the class is over, hold out till a few minutes after class, and then you can go to a room set apart for that purpose. It works with reality. It has to negotiate between these two warring subconscious forces. These two are subconscious, and this one's more conscious. Right? So these two things are floating here below the subconscious. They're in the subconscious part of the mind. That's part of the mind that the conscious mind, you can bring things up. This is remembering, you know. Now some things are taken from conscious mind and put down here. That's called repression. Where they can't be brought up again except by catharsis. So, the libido is saying you need to suck, but a traumatic event happened, the child becomes fixated at the oral stage of development, and that leads to all these different kind of problems with overweight, underweight, gum chewing and smoking and other. Somebody said to Freud, well, I'll get to that in just a second, give you another Freud quote. Let's do, after the oral stage, we've got the anal stage of development. And there's the retention and expulsion of the feces. And what's a traumatic event to the child in the anal stage of development? What do the parents do with the child who's 24 and still pooping in their pants? 24 months. They do toilet training, right? And what's the result of fixation at the anal stage? Well, you can have anal retentive. You might have a sadistic. You might have somebody who's stingy. Right? Somebody who's full of it, somebody who's uptight, maybe authoritarian, or you could have an expulsive. You might have a philanthropist. Somebody who wants to leave something behind. Right? So they, like Carnegie, people leave libraries, or Getty leave museums full of artworks that they've collected, leave them behind. So you might have a philanthropist, generous, artistic, want to spread it around. And then you have the phallic stage. And what's the pleasure in the phallic stage? Now, phallus is an erect penis. The phallus is where the erect penises that they used to put on the statues in the old days. A lot of them have been broken off. Famous case of somebody breaking off the phalluses off the statues was Alcibiades, a general for the Athenians on that disastrous campaign against Syracuse. He and his drunken friends went around the town knocking off the penises off and breaking off the phalluses. So what's the source of libido in the phallic stage of development? It's masturbation. And what are the traumatic events that happen to the child in the phallic stage of development? Well, he can be caught masturbating, in which case the parents might, the little kid comes out, the bridge party, the parents are playing cards with their friends, Little kid comes out playing with himself. You get back in your room, put that back in your shorts before we cut it off. Right? The So these are the traumatic events. What else happens? The primal scene. That's where the kids catch parents doing it. Now what happens with the kid depends on the fixation, result of the primal scene or getting caught. Depends on gender. So in the case of males, we have the Oedipus complex. In the case of females, we have the Electra complex. So I need to tell you the Cliff Notes version. We still have 2 minutes. I will tell you the Cliff Notes version of the story of Oedipus right here. Anybody seen the play? It's a famous play by Sophocles that you may have seen. There probably been movie versions of it. I won't tell you all the adventures of, sometimes people call up and say, tell the one about Oedipus and the Sphinx. I have to say, well, we're just doing Cliff Notes version in here. So Oedipus is born a child to a king and queen. And they go to the oracle and they say, what does life have in store for this child? And the oracle says, they always say in coded ways, they don't always come right out and tell you, but they tell you in certain words you have to figure out what it means. So the oracle says, basically they figured it out to mean, this child is going to kill his father and marry his mother. The parents say, that's pretty bad. Let's kill him. Prevent this from happening. But you know you can't get away with stuff like that. This is before the Bible. You know, when they had a higher standard of morality. The Bible, you can kill your kids, right? You know, it says the kid is disobedient, you just take him to the city gates, and you say, look, I can't do anything with him. He won't listen to me. I tell him to clean up his room, he won't clean up the room. Stone him to death. Everybody's supposed to pick up a stone and kill the kid for you. But in those days, you know, they said, oh, we can't kill him. The fates will never let us go. You can't kill your own children. So what do? Well, they left him with his little locket on. They tied up his feet. They took him up on the side of a mountain, put him on the side of the mountain, said, let some animal come and get him, then it won't be our fault. We'll leave him there alive. So what happens in these stories? Somebody comes along and says, look, somebody threw away a perfectly good kid. Picked him up, took him to another kingdom where there was a king and queen that needed a child. They were trying to have children, but they couldn't have one. And they were worried, if we don't have a successor to the throne, my brother might try to overthrow the throne, so we need to have an heir. They said, well, we'll take this one. He was probably rich. He was wearing a fancy, untie his feet. We'll call him Oedipus because his feet were tied up. Got a nice necklace. So they raised him. He didn't know he's adopted. He's about 18. He goes to the oracle. He says to the oracle, what's life have in store for me? What did the oracle say? You're going to kill your father and marry your mother. So what does he do? He says, well, I have to run away. So he runs away, leaves home. He doesn't know it. But now he runs into his real father. Kills him, comes into town and says, I've just killed your king. I'm going to be king. I'm going to marry your queen. He marries his mother. They have children. So his daughter is also his sister. She figures in some of the sequels. There's a lot of these stories go on and on. You know, there's always sequels to these stories. Long, like ancient soap opera. The stories never end. And he finds out that he's killed his father and married his mother later. How did he find out? Shh, wait just a second. I'll just take one more minute. The old nurse, the nurse that, you know, used to give him his baths was replaced by an, you know, she was sick, so an older nurse had to be brought in. And she says, hey, I never saw you were wearing this necklace. You know, where'd you get that? I said, well, I've always had it, always worn this necklace. I recognize that necklace. Let me see your foot. I know who you are. You're Oedipus. We put you on the side of the mountain, and, you know, they said you're going to kill your father and marry your mother. That's what the oracle told me. He says, well, now you've done it. So he put his eyes out and has a lot more adventures. He meets Theseus, a lot of other things happen. Freud says the reason this story is so good is that's what every boy wants to do. They want to kill their father and marry their mother. Because every boy wants to have sex with their mother. You guys believe it? No, you're in denial. Freud says that's called denial. When you ask people, do you want to have sex with your mother? They go, no, because they're in denial. Well, we'll continue with this next time. This is the Freud's theory of Oedipal complex.